Dog barks at the coffin during funeral when a man asks why the priest gets nervous. And the sky wept over St. Matthew's Church that October morning, its tears mingling with those of the mourners gathered for Hannah Williams' funeral. Great clouds hung heavy overhead, casting long shadows through the stained glass windows onto the polished wooden pews where the small-town community of Millbrook sat in silence. The only sound was the soft patter of rain against ancient stone walls and the occasional muffled sob. Duke, Hannah's loyal German shepherd, lay quietly at the feet of 12-year-old Sarah Williams, who clutched her grandmother's hand, her small shoulders shaking with grief. The dog's ears suddenly perked up, his nose twitching as he fixed his gaze on the mahogany coffin at the altar. Something wasn't right. Father Michael Anderson stood at the pulpit, his usually commanding presence somehow diminished as he delivered the eulogy. Hannah was a pillar of our community, he began, his voice wavering slightly. Her work at the orphanage touched countless lives. A deep, resonant bark echoed through the church, cutting through the solemn atmosphere like a knife. Duke had risen to his feet, hackles raised, eyes locked on the coffin. The mourners shifted uncomfortably in their seats as the dog's barking grew more insistent, more urgent. "Someone please remove that animal," Father Michael called out, wiping beads of sweat from his forehead despite the autumn chill. His hands trembled as he gripped the pulpit tighter. But Duke wouldn't be silenced. He pulled away from Sarah's grasp, padding deliberately toward the coffin, each step punctuated by a threatening growl. The priest's face drained of color. From the back of the church, a stranger watched intently. David Thompson, newly arrived in Millbrook, noticed the priest's unusual reaction. Years of detective work had taught him to read people, and something about Father Michael's behavior set off warning bells in his mind. Father David's voice carried clearly through the tension-filled air. How exactly did Hannah die? The question hung heavy in the church, drawing sharp breaths from the congregation. Father Michael's knuckles whitened against the dark wood of the pulpit, his composed facade cracking for just a moment. "She died peacefully in her sleep," he replied, but his eyes darted nervously between David, Duke, and the coffin. "Now please let us continue with the service." Duke's barking reached a fever pitch, and in that moment the first crack appeared in what would soon be revealed as a carefully constructed lie. In the small town of Millbrook, everyone knew Hannah Williams as the compassionate soul who ran the Cedar Grove Children's Home, but few knew the depths of her strength or the weight of the secret she carried. At 42, her warm brown eyes and gentle smile masked years of personal tragedy and unwavering determination. Her modest two-story Victorian home on Maple Street, with its wraparound porch and well-tended garden, had become a sanctuary for countless children who had nowhere else to go. Hannah's story began 15 years ago when her husband, Thomas, died in what was officially ruled a car accident. Left alone with their 3-year-old daughter, Sarah, Hannah channeled her grief into serving others. She transformed their family home into a safe haven for orphaned and abandoned children, using her background in social work and her inheritance to establish the Cedar Grove Children's Home. The community initially embraced her mission, particularly when Father Michael Anderson, the charismatic new priest at St. Matthew's, publicly endorsed her work. The church became a significant donor, and Hannah's reputation for integrity and compassion grew throughout the county. Children who passed through Cedar Grove spoke of her as a mother figure who taught them not just to survive, but to thrive despite their circumstances. But Hannah's dedication to transparency and charitable operations began stirring troubled waters. Her insistence on detailed financial records and accountability for every donated dollar made certain influential community members uncomfortable. She started noticing discrepancies in the church's charitable accounts, small at first, but growing increasingly significant. What set Hannah apart wasn't just her attention to detail, but her unwavering moral compass. Despite pressure to let things be, she began documenting everything: missing funds, questionable transfers, and mysterious donations that seemed to vanish into thin air. Her personal diary became a detailed record of corruption that reached far beyond Millbrook city limits. The change in how the town viewed her was gradual but unmistakable. Whispers followed her at the grocery store. Donations to Cedar Grove mysteriously dried up. Parents began withdrawing their children from playdates with Sarah. Hannah found herself increasingly isolated, save for her daughter and Duke, the injured German shepherd she had rescued from the side of the road 3 years ago. Duke's arrival at Cedar Grove had been a turning point. Found badly wounded and abandoned, the dog showed signs of professional training that intrigued Hannah. Despite veterinarians suggesting euthanasia, she nursed him back to health. Duke repaid her kindness with unwavering loyalty, becoming not just a pet but a protector of both Hannah and the children in her care. In the weeks before her death, Hannah's behavior changed markedly. She began securing documents in a safe deposit box at Millbrook National Bank. She made recordings on her phone and stored encrypted files on her computer. She even reached out to several journalists, though none seemed to take her concerns seriously enough to investigate. Most troubling were the late-night phone calls and her increasing paranoia about being followed. She installed additional locks on the doors and security cameras around Cedar Grove. She began driving different routes to and from town, always checking her rearview mirror. The final entry in her diary, dated the night before her death, read, "If anything happens to me, look deeper. The truth must come out for the children's sake." The official story was that Hannah died peacefully in her sleep, found by Father Michael when she failed to appear for morning mass. But those who knew her best, particularly the children at Cedar Grove, knew Hannah Williams was not someone who would simply go quietly into the night. She was a fighter, a protector, and above all, a woman who believed that truth and justice were worth any price. Sarah, now living with her maternal grandmother Eleanor, carried her mother's spirit. Despite her young age, she inherited Hannah's determination and keen sense of right and wrong. The day of the funeral, Sarah stood straight-backed and dry-eyed, her hand buried in Duke's fur, watching Father Michael with an intensity that belied her 12 years. What few people knew was that Hannah had been compiling evidence of something far more sinister than simple financial fraud. Her investigation had led her to discover connections between missing donation funds and a series of disappearances from various children's homes across the state. The pattern she uncovered suggested an organized network operating under the guise of charitable work, using religious organizations as cover for their activities. In her final days, Hannah had reached out to one last person, a former detective named David Thompson, whose reputation for incorruptibility had reached her through a network of whistleblowers. Her message to him, sent just hours before her death, contained 3 words: the children first. Hannah Williams might have appeared to be just another small-town social worker, but she had built a case that threatened to expose decades of corruption and abuse. Her death left behind not just grieving children and a devastated daughter, but a legacy of unanswered questions and a trail of evidence that would soon bring the darkness into light. As her body lay in the coffin at St. Matthew's Church, the truth she had died protecting was about to emerge in ways no one could have anticipated. The sleepy town of Millbrook was about to discover that sometimes the greatest acts of courage come from the most unexpected sources, and that justice, though delayed, would not be denied. At 45, David Thompson carried the weight of his past like armor, visible in the premature gray at his temples and the permanent crease between his eyes. Once a decorated detective with the Boston Police Department's Major Crimes Unit, he now found himself in Millbrook, haunted by the unsolved murder of his wife, Rachel, and a justice system he no longer trusted. 5 years ago, Rachel Thompson had been working as a journalist, investigating what appeared to be a routine story about financial irregularities in several East Coast charities. What began as a simple expose turned deadly when she started uncovering connections to organized crime. One rainy October evening, she called David, excitement in her voice about a breakthrough in her investigation. That was the last time he heard her voice. Hours later, her car was found engulfed in flames on a deserted road outside the city. The official investigation ruled it an accident, a tragic case of losing control on wet roads. But David knew better. Rachel had been an exceptionally careful driver, and more importantly, she had left him a voicemail just hours before her death. "David, I found something big. It's not just about the money. There are children involved. I'm heading to meet a source at St. Catherine's. If anything happens." The message cut off there. The case consumed him. He spent countless sleepless nights poring over evidence, following leads that his colleagues dismissed, and pushing boundaries that eventually cost him his badge. His former partner, James Cooper, tried to intervene, warning him that his obsession was destroying him. But David couldn't let it go. Not when every instinct told him Rachel's death was connected to something far more sinister than anyone imagined. His dismissal from the force came after he publicly accused several high-ranking officials of covering up evidence in Rachel's case. The department cited psychological instability and unfounded conspiracy theories as reasons for his termination. The media painted him as a grieving husband who had lost his grip on reality. Former friends and colleagues distanced themselves, leaving him isolated with his theories and evidence that no one wanted to examine. David retreated to a small cabin in Maine, spending 2 years rebuilding himself from the ground up. He took private investigator cases, mostly missing persons and corporate fraud, building a new reputation for thoroughness and discretion. It was during this time that he began receiving anonymous emails, carefully encrypted messages containing pieces of information that seemed to confirm his suspicions about Rachel's death. The trail led him to Millbrook, a town that appeared perfectly ordinary on the surface. But David had learned to look beneath surfaces, and what he found troubled him deeply. The same patterns Rachel had discovered in Boston were present here: suspicious financial transactions, missing records, and a web of connections centered around charitable organizations with seemingly impeccable reputations. When Hannah Williams' email reached him, containing those 3 simple words, the children first, something clicked. The phrase had appeared in Rachel's notes, underlined 3 times in red ink. Within hours of receiving Hannah's message, he learned of her death, and the similarities to Rachel's case were impossible to ignore. David rented a small apartment above the local hardware store, introducing himself as a writer researching small-town American life. He began attending services at St. Matthew's Church, watching Father Michael Anderson with the trained eye of a detective. He noticed the priest's careful control of church finances, his close relationships with local officials, and most importantly, his reaction to any mention of Hannah Williams. The more David observed, the more his investigator's instincts screamed that something was very wrong in Millbrook. The town's prosperity seemed at odds with the declining regional economy. The local orphanage, despite its excellent reputation, had a disturbing pattern of children being transferred to specialized facilities that left no paper trail. And Father Michael's nervous behavior at Hannah's funeral confirmed what David had begun to suspect: her death was no accident. His years of experience had taught him patience in investigation, but also showed him the importance of timing. When Duke's barking disrupted the funeral service, David recognized it as the moment to begin unraveling the carefully constructed facade that had protected Millbrook's secrets for so long. What set David apart wasn't just his investigative skills or his determination to find justice. It was his ability to see patterns where others saw coincidence, and his willingness to follow those patterns regardless of where they led. His own tragedy had taught him that evil often wore respectable faces, and that truth could be a dangerous thing in a world built on carefully maintained lies. As he watched Duke's reaction to Hannah's coffin, David felt the familiar surge of adrenaline that came with breaking open a case. But this time was different. This wasn't just about finding justice for Rachel anymore. It was about finishing what both Rachel and Hannah had started, exposing a darkness that had been allowed to flourish in the shadows of respectability for far too long. Duke's story was more than that of a simple rescued dog. His scarred body and military-grade training suggested a past in law enforcement, though how he ended up abandoned and injured remained a mystery. Under Hannah's care, he transformed from a wounded warrior into a gentle guardian, particularly protective of Sarah and the children at Cedar Grove. His intelligence and unwavering loyalty made him more than a pet. He became a silent witness to the undercurrents of corruption flowing through Millbrook. Father Michael Anderson held Millbrook in his charismatic grip for the past 7 years. His carefully cultivated image as a compassionate spiritual leader masked a calculating mind. At 55, his silver-streaked hair and kind eyes made him the picture of trustworthiness, earning him not just the devotion of his congregation but the confidence of influential figures throughout the region. His weekly sermons drew crowds from neighboring towns, and his fundraising abilities were legendary. But beneath the polished surface lay a web of carefully hidden secrets and ruthlessly protected interests. Sarah Williams, at 12, carried herself with a maturity beyond her years. Her mother's death had left her in the care of her grandmother, Eleanor, but it hadn't broken her spirit. Dark-haired and solemn-eyed, she inherited Hannah's keen sense of justice and her father's quiet strength. Despite the whispers and sideways glances from former friends, Sarah maintained her dignity, finding solace in Duke's companionship and in helping the younger children at Cedar Grove. She noticed things others missed, storing away observations with a child's perfect memory. Detective James Cooper, David's former partner from Boston, played a more complex role than anyone suspected. At 50, his weathered face and steady demeanor projected reliability, but his loyalties were divided. While he publicly distanced himself from David's obsession with Rachel's death, he secretly maintained contact, passing along information through secure channels. His position within the Boston Police Department made him valuable, but it also placed him in increasing danger as the investigation in Millbrook began to intersect with his own discoveries. Eleanor Matthews, Hannah's mother and Sarah's grandmother, became the family's anchor after Hannah's death. A retired librarian with a steel-trap memory, she had been helping Hannah document the financial discrepancies at St. Matthew's. Her small house on Oak Street became a safe haven for Sarah and a repository for Hannah's research. At 68, her gentle exterior belied a fierce determination to protect her granddaughter and honor her daughter's memory. The children of Cedar Grove played a crucial role in the unfolding drama. Each had their own story of loss and resilience, but together they formed a tight-knit family under Hannah's care. There was Tommy Martinez, aged 10, who had an uncanny ability to remember numbers and dates. Lisa Chin, 14, who helped Hannah with the younger children and noticed when strangers started watching the house. Ben Parker, 8, who saw Father Michael having heated arguments with Hannah in her office late at night. Mayor Robert Wilson, a pillar of Millbrook society, maintained a careful balance between public service and private interests. His connection to Father Michael extended beyond their weekly golf games, though few understood the true nature of their relationship. His wife, Margaret Wilson, chaired numerous charity boards and maintained a sterling reputation for philanthropy, while quietly helping to facilitate the movement of large sums of money through various charitable organizations. Dr. Emily Sullivan, the local veterinarian who treated Duke, harbored her own suspicions about the dog's past and the circumstances that brought him to Millbrook. Her detailed records of his injuries suggested a trained police dog who had been deliberately targeted. Her friendship with Hannah had made her privy to concerns about strange activities at the church, but fear for her own safety had kept her silent until now. Officer Mark Reynolds, a rookie on the Millbrook police force, struggled between his duty to the department and his growing awareness of corruption within the town's power structure. His own sister had passed through Cedar Grove years ago, and Hannah's kindness had never been forgotten. His position gave him access to information, though using it meant risking not just his career but possibly his life. The community itself became a character in the unfolding drama. The townspeople of Millbrook, with their complex web of relationships and shared histories, found themselves forced to confront uncomfortable truths about their leaders and their own willingness to look the other way. Longtime residents like Betty Anderson, who ran the local diner, and Frank Miller, the hardware store owner, held pieces of the puzzle without realizing their significance. Among the most enigmatic figures was Sister Mary Catherine from St. Matthew's. Her quiet presence in the church office gave her access to sensitive information, and her apparent devotion to Father Michael masked a growing horror at what she had witnessed. Her crisis of conscience would ultimately play a crucial role in exposing the truth. The staff at Cedar Grove, including Maria Rodriguez, the cook who had worked there since its founding, and Tom Bradley, the maintenance man who noticed strange late-night visitors, formed a protective circle around the children in their care. Their loyalty to Hannah's memory and their determination to protect her legacy would prove invaluable in the days to come. These supporting characters, each with their own motivations, fears, and secrets, formed the complex tapestry of Millbrook society. As David and Duke began to pull at the threads of corruption, their individual stories would interweave in unexpected ways, leading to revelations that would shake the community to its foundations. The storm hit Millbrook with unprecedented fury. 3 days of relentless rain had swollen the river creek beyond its banks, transforming the peaceful waterway into a raging torrent. At Memorial Hospital, the emergency room filled with injured residents as flood warnings blared across all channels. Thomas stood at the hospital windows, watching the water rise in the parking lot. Max, unusually agitated, paced between the entrance doors and the stairs leading to the lower ground floor. The dog's behavior caught Thomas's attention. This wasn't his normal patient vigil. "Something's wrong," Sarah observed, following Max's movements. Before Thomas could respond, the dog barked sharply and bolted down the stairs. Without hesitation, Thomas followed, with Sarah close behind. The scene in the basement storage area stopped them cold. Water was seeping through the walls, and trapped in a far corner were two maintenance workers, struggling with a heavy storage cabinet that had fallen, blocking their escape route. The water level was rising rapidly. Max reached them first, splashing through the ankle-deep water. The dog's presence seemed to calm the panicked workers. Thomas and Sarah worked quickly to help free them, but as they turned to leave, they heard something that made their blood run cold, a faint meowing coming from behind the fallen cabinet. The shelter cats, Sarah gasped. They were temporarily housed here during the renovation. The hospital had agreed to store some of the shelter's overflow animals in a dry storage room, a decision that now proved potentially catastrophic. Without hesitation, Max began pawing at the gap behind the cabinet, his actions purposeful and determined. Thomas and the maintenance workers managed to create a small opening, allowing Sarah to reach in and retrieve 3 carrier cages containing terrified cats. But their relief was short-lived. The water was rising faster now, and a creaking sound from above signaled structural stress. They needed to evacuate immediately, but Max refused to leave, continuing to bark at the corner. There must be more, Thomas realized. He shone his flashlight into the darkness, revealing another carrier pushed far back, almost invisible in the shadows. The opening was too small for an adult to reach through. Max didn't hesitate. The dog squeezed through the gap, water now up to his chest, and carefully gripped the carrier's handle with his teeth. With gentle determination, he maneuvered it through the opening, refusing to let go until Thomas had a firm grip. They barely made it up the stairs before the basement floor completely flooded. As emergency teams arrived to assess the damage, news spread quickly about Max's rescue efforts. But the dog wasn't finished. Throughout the night, Max's behavior led emergency responders to several more crisis points around the hospital. His acute senses detected a weakening in the emergency room wall before instruments could register the danger, allowing for evacuation before the structure partially collapsed. In the pediatric ward, it was Max who first alerted staff to water seeping into the electrical system, preventing a potential catastrophe. His actions, guided by some inexplicable instinct, saved countless lives. But the most remarkable moment came near dawn. Max suddenly became extremely agitated, scratching at the door to Edward's old room 204. Thomas followed, puzzled, as the dog led him to a seemingly solid wall panel. Following Max's cues, Thomas discovered the panel was loose. Behind it, protected in a waterproof container, lay a package of documents, Edward's hidden evidence. In his final days, Edward had concealed proof of his innocence where he knew it would eventually be found. The flood waters began receding the next day, leaving behind a changed landscape. The hospital had survived largely intact, thanks to early warnings and swift action. But more than physical damage had been averted. The crisis had revealed both Max's extraordinary character and another piece of Edward's story. The local media arrived to cover the flood damage, but found themselves reporting a different story, one of a dog whose intelligence and courage had saved both lives and truth. Even the most hardened skeptics couldn't deny Max's actions during the crisis. Clara, watching the news coverage from her temporary shelter at the high school, felt tears rolling down her cheeks. This was the true legacy of her brother, not the scandal that had tainted his name, but the loving spirit he had nurtured in Max. In the aftermath of the flood, Thomas sat alone in his office, examining the waterproof container Max had led them to find. His hands trembled slightly as he opened Edward's journal, its pages filled with meticulous documentation and carefully preserved receipts. The truth that emerged was more complex and heartbreaking than anyone had imagined. The journal's first entry dated back 3 years, when Margaret Wilson first received her cancer diagnosis. Edward's neat handwriting detailed her desperate situation, rejected by insurance, running out of options, facing death without treatment. The experimental therapy that could save her cost exactly $250,000. Today, Margaret asked me to keep her illness private. One entry read, "Her research reputation would be destroyed if people knew. She gave me my first chance 30 years ago. How can I deny her this one request?" The words carried the weight of a decision that would ultimately cost Edward everything. Subsequent pages revealed a careful plan to redirect shelter funds temporarily, with intentions to replace them through personal assets. But before Edward could complete the repayment, the board's investigation began. He had chosen silence over self-defense. protecting Margaret's dignity at the cost of his own. Clara arrived at the hospital as Thomas was midway through the journal. Her face showed the strain of sleepless nights and grief. "I should have known," she whispered, touching her brother's familiar handwriting. "He never did anything without a reason." The most damning evidence lay in a series of bank statements and correspondence. They showed systematic embezzlement by several board members, including Gerald Parker's father, dating back years before Edward's supposed crime. The missing shelter funds were merely a cover for their own misdeeds. Margaret Wilson, now recovered, had been living with the burden of this knowledge. When Thomas and Clara visited her small apartment, she finally broke her silence. "Edward made me promise not to speak up," she explained, tears streaming down her face. "He said the truth would come out when it needed to, and that my life's work shouldn't be destroyed by illness." But perhaps the most poignant revelations came from Edward's personal letters, never sent but carefully preserved. "To Clara, little sister, your anger is justified. I only hope someday you'll understand that some promises must be kept, even at great cost. And to the shelter staff, your dedication to our animals gives me hope. Truth, like love, finds its way home eventually." The documents revealed something else. Gerald Parker's father had discovered Edward's actions but used the information for blackmail rather than exposure. The elder Parker had threatened to reveal Margaret's condition publicly unless Edward took full blame for the missing funds, protecting the board's own misdeeds. Jenny Martinez found additional proof in the shelter's records, hidden in plain sight through creative accounting. Years of small discrepancies added up to a pattern of systematic theft by the board members, who had been quickest to condemn Edward. As news of these discoveries spread, the town's reaction shifted. Those who had been loudest in condemning Edward fell silent. Others, who had harbored quiet doubts about his guilt, began speaking up. The narrative that had seemed so clear a year ago now revealed its complicated layers. David Chin, the reporter who had covered Edward's downfall, published a detailed expose in the Millbrook Gazette. A tale of two sacrifices detailed both Edward's silent protection of Margaret and the broader corruption he had uncovered. The article forced the community to confront its rush to judgment. Clara found herself remembering conversations with her brother that now carried new meaning. His cryptic comments about necessary sacrifices and protecting those who can't protect themselves had meant so much more than she'd understood at the time. The most surprising revelation came from an unexpected source. Mrs. Henderson, Edward's elderly client, brought forward a recording of a conversation between Gerald Parker and his father, captured accidentally on her phone during a shelter board meeting. Their discussion of containing Harrison's evidence and maintaining the story provided damning proof of their conspiracy. Thomas watched the town's transformation with mixed emotions. The truth was vindicating Edward's memory, but it came too late for the man himself to see it. Yet, as he observed Max's continued vigil at the hospital entrance, he understood that perhaps this had been Edward's plan all along, to let time and truth work together. The transformation of Millbrook began like a slow-moving tide, subtle at first but ultimately unstoppable. As Edward's true story spread through the community, people started leaving flowers at his old clinic. The once empty building, its windows still covered with newspaper, became a makeshift memorial. Photos, notes, and memories of kindness shared. The shelter, once teetering on the brink of closure, experienced an unprecedented wave of support. Local businesses that had previously shunned association now competed to help. Miller's Grocery organized a monthly supply drive. The hardware store offered free repairs. Even the local coffee shop, the Daily Grind, created a Max's Blend with proceeds going to animal care. But the most profound changes occurred in individual hearts. Mrs. Peterson, who had loudly condemned Edward at church meetings, now volunteered weekends at the shelter. "I judged too quickly," she admitted to Jenny, tears in her eyes as she cleaned kennels. "We all did." The hospital board, influenced by the flood crisis and Max's heroics, officially designated him as the facility's first therapy dog. Thomas created a program incorporating animal-assisted therapy into patient recovery, particularly in the pediatric ward. Children who had faced Max's gentle presence during the flood now brightened at his daily visits. Clara took a leave of absence from teaching to focus on restoring her brother's legacy. She spent hours organizing Edward's documents, working with legal authorities to formally clear his name. Each discovery about his silent sacrifices deepened her determination to make amends. The media attention shifted dramatically. Where once they had published scandalous headlines about Edward's supposed crimes, they now ran stories about loyalty, sacrifice, and redemption. David Chen's series The Truth Behind the Silence won regional journalism awards and sparked conversations about community responsibility. Local schools incorporated the story into their curriculum. Students learned about integrity, judgment, and the importance of seeking truth rather than accepting rumors. Max became a regular visitor to Clara's classroom, where children wrote essays about courage and loyalty. The shelter board underwent a complete overhaul. New members, carefully vetted and committed to transparency, replaced those implicated in the corruption scandal. They established the Edward Harrison Memorial Fund for animals needing special medical care, the very cause that had led to his downfall. Sarah Mitchell organized a hospital staff support group inspired by Edward's story of silent sacrifice. Healthcare workers shared their own experiences of difficult choices and moral dilemmas. The meetings helped heal old wounds and create stronger bonds among the staff. Perhaps most remarkably, some of Edward's staunchest critics became his strongest defenders. The transformation was exemplified by Reverend Matthews, who had once called for Edward's removal from the shelter board. He now dedicated sermons to themes of forgiveness and hasty judgment, often referencing Edward's story. The annual town festival, usually focused on local agriculture, added an animal welfare component. The Edward Harrison Compassion Award was established to recognize individuals who demonstrated exceptional dedication to animal care and community service. Local artists contributed to the changing narrative. A mural appeared on the side of the shelter building, depicting Edward with Max and other animals he had helped. The image became a symbol of the town's journey from judgment to understanding. Thomas observed these changes with quiet satisfaction, though his thoughts often turned to Edward's absence. "He should be here to see this," he confided to Max during their evening talks. The dog's understanding eyes seemed to suggest that perhaps Edward had known this day would come. The shelter itself transformed physically. Donations funded renovations, new medical equipment, and expanded facilities. The Edward Harrison Memorial Clinic opened in the West Wing, providing low-cost veterinary care to families in need, fulfilling Edward's original vision. As winter turned to spring, the community's healing became visible in countless small ways. People stopped to pet Max, sharing stories of how Edward had helped them or their pets. The shame of hasty judgment was gradually replaced by determination to do better, to be better. The breakthrough in the investigation came through an unlikely source. 12-year-old Tommy Martinez's diary, discovered hidden beneath a loose floorboard in his former room at Cedar Grove. The child's careful observations, written in unsteady handwriting, provided crucial details about late-night visitors and strange conversations he had overheard before his transfer. His final entry, dated 3 days before his disappearance, mentioned seeing Father Michael placing something inside the church's old statue of St. Joseph. David's examination of the statue revealed a hollowed-out compartment containing a small metal box. Inside were USB drives, offshore account numbers, and a handwritten ledger detailing transactions spanning 5 years. The amounts corresponded perfectly with Hannah's original findings, but more disturbingly, each entry was paired with initials and dates that matched the disappearances of children from various orphanages. Hannah's own evidence trail proved even more extensive than initially suspected. Eleanor discovered a false bottom in her daughter's antique writing desk containing a passport-sized photo of each child who had been transferred from Cedar Grove. On the back of each photo were coordinates and dates meticulously documented in Hannah's neat handwriting. When mapped, the coordinates revealed a pattern of movement through specific ports and border crossings. Working late into the night in his room above the hardware store, David began connecting pieces of Hannah's investigation to his wife Rachel's notes. The same shell companies appeared in both sets of documents, often linked to charitable foundations with pristine public reputations. Bank statements showed regular transfers from these foundations to accounts in countries known for their banking secrecy. Sister Mary Catherine's conscience finally broke under the weight of what she knew. She provided David with access to Father Michael's private files, revealing a complex network of connections between the church, local government, and international adoption agencies. The documentation showed how legitimate-looking paperwork could be created for virtually any child, complete with falsified medical records and court approvals. The evidence trail led to a series of storage units registered under various church auxiliary organizations. Inside one, David discovered boxes of original documents that had been reported lost in a fire at the county records office. These papers revealed a pattern of property acquisitions by the church, all connected to locations where children had been temporarily held before disappearing into the trafficking network. Dr. Emily Sullivan's veterinary records provided another crucial piece of the puzzle. Her detailed notes about Duke's injuries suggested he had been deliberately targeted, possibly because of his training and connection to law enforcement. More importantly, her security cameras had captured footage of the priest's car at unusual hours on the nights before several children disappeared. Sarah's contribution to the evidence trail came from her mother's teaching her to play spy games. Hannah had created a complex scavenger hunt throughout their house, each clue leading to another piece of evidence. The final piece was a video recording hidden inside Sarah's favorite teddy bear, in which Hannah detailed everything she had uncovered about the trafficking operation. Officer Reynolds, risking his career, provided access to police records showing a pattern of dismissed complaints and buried investigations whenever questions were raised about missing children. The reports revealed how local law enforcement had been compromised, with officers being promoted or transferred based on their willingness to look the other way. The financial evidence became undeniable when David obtained records from Millbrook National Bank through a sympathetic teller. The documents showed how donation money was laundered through a series of legitimate-looking transactions, eventually funding the purchase of properties and vehicles used in the trafficking operation. Each transaction was carefully disguised as charitable work, making the money trail almost impossible to follow without inside knowledge. Maria Rodriguez, the cook at Cedar Grove, had kept her own records, photographs taken on her phone of unusual visitors and vehicles, along with dates and times. Her meticulous nature proved invaluable as her documentation corroborated the patterns Hannah had discovered. The most damning evidence came from Tom Bradley's maintenance logs. His detailed records of repairs and installations included dates and times when he had been asked to modify rooms at Cedar Grove, creating hidden spaces that could temporarily conceal children. His notes also documented the installation of soundproofing materials in the church basement, ordered directly by Father Michael. Hannah's final piece of evidence, found encrypted on her laptop by Sarah, was a comprehensive database linking every missing child to specific transactions and locations. The database included photographs, dates, and amounts paid, creating an irrefutable connection between the church's charitable operations and the disappearance of vulnerable children. As David pieced together the evidence, a clear picture emerged of a sophisticated operation that had been running for years, protected by a network of influential people who benefited from its profits. The evidence trail revealed not just criminal activity, but a systemic failure of institutions meant to protect the most vulnerable. The first serious attempt on Duke's life came on a quiet Sunday evening. Sarah was walking in near Cedar Grove when a black SUV swerved deliberately toward them. Only Duke's training and quick reflexes saved them both, pulling Sarah out of harm's way moments before the vehicle mounted the curb. The incident was dismissed by local police as a distracted driver, but Officer Reynolds quietly provided David with surveillance footage showing the same vehicle circling the area multiple times before the attempt. Threats against Sarah intensified at school. Her locker was vandalized with threatening messages, and anonymous notes appeared on her desk warning her to keep quiet or else Eleanor began finding dead animals on her front porch, carefully arranged to send a message. The morning she discovered her granddaughter's favorite stuffed animal, a gift from Hannah, mutilated and placed on their doorstep, she knew they had crossed a dangerous threshold. David's room above the hardware store was broken into multiple times. Each intrusion became more aggressive, first just papers disturbed, then furniture overturned, and finally a warning painted on his wall in red: "Leave now or join Rachel." The message's reference to his wife made it clear that his enemies knew exactly who he was and why he had come to Millbrook. The pressure on their allies increased dramatically. Dr. Sullivan's clinic was vandalized overnight, with specific damage done to her patient records and security cameras. The message was clear when they targeted only files related to Duke and destroyed footage from specific dates matching children's disappearances. The veterinarian began sleeping in her clinic, armed with a baseball bat and her own security system. Betty Anderson's diner suffered a suspicious kitchen fire that investigators quickly ruled accidental despite clear signs of arson. The damage was specifically focused on the booth where David usually sat, which had concealed a small camera he had installed to monitor church visitors. The timing of the fire, just hours after Betty had provided crucial information about late-night meetings at the church, was no coincidence. Sister Mary Catherine's cooperation proved costly. She was found unconscious in the church office, an apparent fall that resulted in a concussion. Her room at the convent was ransacked while she was in the hospital, and her personal diary containing years of observations about church activities disappeared. The message sent to her hospital room was simple: accidents happen to those who forget their vows. Officer Reynolds faced escalating professional retaliation. Anonymous complaints about his conduct appeared in his file. His patrol routes were changed to keep him away from key locations, and his partner was replaced with someone known to be loyal to the mayor. His home was broken into, nothing taken but his service weapon left conspicuously displayed on his kitchen table, a clear threat. The children at Cedar Grove became targets for intimidation. Those who had been closest to Hannah found themselves subjected to behavioral evaluations that always concluded with recommendations for transfer to distant facilities. The implicit threat was clear: cooperate with the investigation and more children would disappear into the system. Frank Miller, despite his initial reluctance to get involved, discovered the cost of helping David when his hardware store suppliers suddenly began canceling deliveries. His bank called in his business loans without warning, and anonymous reviews began appearing online accusing him of selling defective products. His security cameras were repeatedly vandalized, always on nights when suspicious activities were observed at the church. Maria Rodriguez arrived one morning to find the Cedar Grove kitchen completely destroyed. Every surface had been smashed, but most telling was the careful destruction of only those areas where she had hidden her own documentation of suspicious activities. The message left in her native Spanish made it clear that her family back home could be reached if she didn't forget everything she had seen. Tom Bradley's maintenance records disappeared during a break-in at his home, along with his personal notes about unusual modifications he'd been ordered to make to the church basement. His tools were stolen, and his work truck's brake lines were discovered just in time to prevent a potentially fatal accident. The escalation reached a new level when David's former partner James Cooper arrived in Millbrook with an urgent warning. Cooper's own family had been threatened, and he had discovered that the corruption reached deep into Boston's police department. His visit was cut short when his hotel room was broken into and his case file stolen, prompting a hasty departure with a final warning: they'll burn everything down before they let you expose this. Sarah's school life became increasingly dangerous. A substitute teacher attempted to lure her into an unmarked car during recess, thwarted only by Duke's unexpected appearance at the school fence. The incident was dismissed by school administrators despite multiple witnesses, and security camera footage from that day mysteriously disappeared. The danger culminated in a coordinated attack that demonstrated the resources aligned against them. On the same night David's room was firebombed, Sarah and Eleanor's house was broken into, and Duke was poisoned with professional-grade drugs that nearly killed him. Only their own precautions and growing paranoia prevented casualties, but the message was unmistakable: no one was safe. These escalating threats served to confirm the scale of what they were fighting against. Each attack revealed the desperation of their opponents and the extent of their influence. Yet rather than intimidating them into silence, the danger strengthened their resolve. They began to understand that Hannah had died because she was close to exposing something big enough to justify murder. The first cracks in Millbrook's unified facade appeared during a heated town hall meeting. Mayor Wilson had called the gathering to address concerns about recent disruptions to our peaceful community, but the discussion quickly spiraled out of control. Parents whose children had passed through Cedar Grove stood up to question the mysterious transfers, while others defended Father Michael's reputation with religious fervor. Betty Anderson's diner became ground zero for the community split. The longtime establishment saw tables divided between those who supported the investigation and those who branded David a troublemaker. Regular customers of 20 years stopped speaking to each other, and heated arguments broke out over coffee and pie. Betty herself faced criticism for allowing David to continue using the diner as his unofficial office. The Sunday church service became a battleground of whispers and pointed looks. Father Michael's sermons took on a darker tone, speaking of wolves in sheep's clothing and the importance of unity in the face of outside threats. Some parishioners began openly leaving when he spoke, while others doubled down on their support, creating a visible divide in the congregation. The local newspaper, the Millbrook Gazette, found itself caught in the crossfire. Editor-in-Chief Margaret Stevens faced pressure from advertisers when she attempted to publish a balanced article about Hannah's death and the subsequent investigation. Anonymous letters to the editor filled each issue, some supporting the investigation and others condemning it, reflecting the town's growing division. Cedar Grove itself became a symbol of the split. While some community members rallied to support the orphanage with food donations and volunteer work, others withdrew their support entirely. Parents stopped allowing their children to play with the Cedar Grove kids, and local businesses that had previously offered job training to older residents now closed their doors. The school board meetings turned contentious as parents argued over Sarah's presence in the school. Some demanded her removal, claiming she was disrupting the learning environment, while others defended her right to an education free from harassment. Teachers found themselves caught between professional obligations and personal beliefs, creating tension in the classrooms. The police department experienced its own internal strife. Officer Reynolds' support of the investigation created a rift among his colleagues. Some officers began refusing to patrol with him, while others secretly shared information about suspicious activities they had observed but been ordered to ignore. The division affected response times and patrol coverage throughout Millbrook. Local businesses faced difficult decisions as pressure mounted from both sides. Frank Miller's hardware store saw longtime customers divide between those who supported his renting to David and those who called for a boycott. The local coffee shop put up signs banning political discussions after several heated confrontations between customers. The library board's attempt to fire Eleanor Matthews backfired when half the staff threatened to resign in protest. The resulting controversy led to public debates about the influence of the church and local government in community institutions. The library became an unexpected symbol of resistance, with some patrons deliberately checking out books about investigative journalism and child advocacy. Even the hospital wasn't immune to the division. Dr. Sullivan's colleagues found themselves choosing sides after her clinic was vandalized. Some medical professionals began questioning the documentation of previous deaths in Millbrook, including Hannah's, while others insisted on maintaining their traditional relationships with the church and local government. The children of Millbrook became unwitting participants in the conflict. Friendships dissolved as parents forbade their kids from associating with those on the wrong side. Birthday parties and play dates became political statements, with invitations and exclusions reflecting the adults' allegiances. Sister Mary Catherine's accident caused a schism within the church staff. Some began questioning Father Michael's leadership, while others doubled down on their loyalty. The resulting tension affected church operations, with some volunteers quietly withdrawing their services while others became more militant in their support. The town's annual festivals and celebrations, once a source of community pride, became contentious affairs. The Harvest Festival Committee split over whether to allow Cedar Grove children to participate. The Christmas pageant became a political statement as families chose whether to participate based on their stance in the growing conflict. Local charities found themselves under scrutiny as questions arose about their connections to the church. Some organizations distanced themselves from St. Matthew's, while others aligned more closely with Father Michael. The resulting funding battles affected multiple community services and support programs. As tensions mounted, the physical geography of Millbrook began to reflect its social divisions. Certain neighborhoods became associated with either support for or opposition to the investigation. Property values shifted as people moved to be closer to those who shared their views, creating unofficial boundaries within the once unified town. The division reached its peak when a group of concerned citizens called for an independent investigation into Hannah's death. The town council meeting erupted in chaos, with shouting matches between neighbors who had known each other for decades. The meeting ended with no resolution, but the battle lines were clearly drawn. The formation of alliances began quietly in Betty Anderson's diner after closing hours. What started as informal meetings between David, Eleanor, and Dr. Sullivan evolved into a structured network of concerned citizens. Betty's back room became their war room, where maps of Millbrook covered the walls, marked with dates, locations, and connections that grew more complex by the day. Former Cedar Grove residents started coming forward, drawn by Sarah's courage and standing up to intimidation. Among them was Michael Roberts, now a successful lawyer in Boston, who had spent 3 years at the home under Hannah's care. His legal expertise proved invaluable in navigating the complexities of adoption records and international law. More importantly, his testimony about Hannah's character helped counter the campaign to discredit her. Officer Reynolds built a careful network within the police department. Junior officers, troubled by orders to ignore certain activities, began passing information through a complex system of coded messages left in routine paperwork. A dispatcher, whose own sister had disappeared from a similar facility in another state, helped track patrol patterns that could affect their investigation. Dr. Sullivan's professional connections proved crucial. Her veterinary practice was part of a regional network, and through careful conversations with colleagues, she discovered similar patterns of financial irregularities and missing children in other towns with large church-run charities. Each connection added another piece to the growing puzzle. The breakthrough in their alliance building came from an unexpected source. Sister Agnes, a retired nun who had served at St. Matthew's for over 40 years, reached out through Eleanor. Her detailed records of church activities, kept meticulously in her personal journals, provided historical context for the changes that began with Father Michael's arrival. More importantly, she knew of other nuns in other parishes who had raised similar concerns. Local journalists, initially skeptical, began taking interest as evidence mounted. Margaret Stevens, the editor of the Millbrook Gazette, couldn't publish the story directly due to pressure from advertisers, but she connected David with reporters from larger regional papers who weren't subject to local influence. These connections provided both protection and a potential platform for exposing the truth. The children at Cedar Grove became their own network of allies. Taught by Hannah to be observant, they developed a system of subtle signals to warn each other about suspicious visitors or unusual activities. Their information, filtered through Sarah, often provided crucial advance warning of planned actions against the investigation. Frank Miller's hardware store became a hub of resistance. His security cameras, strategically positioned to cover the church grounds, were supplemented by a network of local business owners who had begun to question the official narrative. Shop windows became communication points, with seemingly innocent displays conveying messages to those who knew what to look for. Maria Rodriguez activated her own network within Millbrook's Hispanic community. Many worked in service positions at local institutions, including the church and town hall, providing access to conversations and documents that would otherwise have remained hidden. Their observations, combined with David's investigation, created a comprehensive picture of the operation's scope. Tom Bradley's connections in the construction industry proved invaluable. Other maintenance workers and contractors who had done work for the church began sharing stories of unusual renovation requests and suspicious modifications to buildings. Their technical knowledge helped identify potential locations where children might have been held before transport. The alliance expanded to include former law enforcement officers who had worked with David in Boston. Though they couldn't officially investigate, their experience helped identify patterns and predict the opposition's likely moves. Their presence in town, rotating regularly to avoid detection, provided both protection and professional surveillance capabilities. Parents of missing children from other communities began reaching out after finding Hannah's research online. Each story followed a similar pattern: vulnerable children, prestigious charitable organizations, and investigations that went nowhere. Their testimonies created a database of evidence spanning multiple states and years. Eleanor's library connections facilitated secure communication channels, book club meetings became cover for strategy sessions, and the interlibrary loan system allowed them to move documents safely. Her reputation as a respected community elder helped legitimize their cause among Millbrook's older residents. Sarah's school friends, despite pressure from their parents, formed their own support network. They shared information heard at home, passed notes about suspicious activities, and maintained a protective circle around her during school hours. Their loyalty, inspired by Hannah's kindness during her time at Cedar Grove, proved invaluable. The alliance grew stronger as each member contributed their unique skills and connections. Betty's diner staff learned to identify and track suspicious customers. Dr. Sullivan's clinic became a secure meeting point for sharing sensitive information. Frank Miller's delivery routes provided cover for surveillance operations. David Thompson's transformation became evident through the small moments. The man who had arrived in Millbrook consumed by vengeance for his wife's death found himself opening up to new connections. His protective instincts toward Sarah went beyond the case, reminding him of the humanity he'd nearly lost in his pursuit of justice. Late nights at Betty's Diner became less about the investigation and more about building genuine relationships with people who shared his commitment to truth. Sarah Williams demonstrated remarkable resilience in the face of continued harassment. Rather than withdrawing, she channeled her mother's strength, standing taller with each challenge. Her academic performance improved despite the hostile environment, and she began mentoring younger children at Cedar Grove, continuing Hannah's legacy of care and protection. The quiet, grieving girl transformed into a confident young advocate for those who couldn't speak for themselves. Eleanor Matthews discovered reserves of strength she hadn't known she possessed. Initially devastated by her daughter's death, she found purpose in protecting Sarah and continuing Hannah's work. Her role evolved from grieving mother to community organizer, using her respected position to build bridges between divided factions. The skills she'd developed over decades as a librarian, organizing information, connecting people with resources, maintaining discretion, became powerful tools in their cause. Duke's recovery from the poisoning attempt marked a turning point for the entire group. His determination to protect Sarah, even while weakened, inspired others. Dr. Sullivan noted that his protective instincts extended beyond Sarah to all the children at Cedar Grove, demonstrating an almost uncanny ability to identify those who meant them harm. His loyalty became a symbol of the resilience they all needed to develop. Officer Reynolds faced a crisis of conscience that forced him to confront his own values. Each incident he was ordered to ignore tested his commitment to the badge he wore. Through his struggle, he found a deeper understanding of what it meant to serve and protect, even when that meant standing against his own department. His integrity, once tested, emerged stronger and more defined. Dr. Sullivan's transformation from cautious observer to active participant showed in her growing confidence. Her clinic became more than a veterinary practice. It evolved into a safe haven for those seeking to share information. She learned to trust her instincts about people, to speak up against injustice, and to use her professional reputation as a shield for others. Betty Anderson discovered her own quiet strength through small acts of defiance. Each cup of coffee served to David, each late-night meeting hosted in her diner's back room, represented a choice to stand for truth over comfort. Her business suffered, but her sense of purpose grew stronger with each passing day. Frank Miller, who had initially rented to David purely for financial reasons, underwent a profound change in perspective. His hardware store became a fortress of resistance, and he found himself taking increasingly bold stands against pressure from local authorities. The respect he earned from those fighting for justice meant more than the business he lost. Maria Rodriguez transformed from a quiet observer into a crucial coordinator of information. Her natural caution evolved into strategic thinking, and her connection to the Hispanic community became a powerful network for gathering intelligence. She found her voice, speaking up at community meetings and organizing support for affected families. Sister Mary Catherine's recovery in the hospital became a journey of spiritual renewal. Her faith, tested by the corruption she witnessed, emerged stronger but more nuanced. She learned to distinguish between loyalty to the church as an institution and fidelity to its true principles of protecting the vulnerable. Tom Bradley's growth was reflected in his shifting priorities. Once focused solely on maintaining buildings, he began to see his role as protecting the children who lived within them. His technical knowledge became a tool for justice rather than just a means of earning a living. The risks he took to document suspicious activities showed his evolution from employee to advocate. Sarah's school friends, initially drawn into the conflict through loyalty to her, developed their own sense of justice and courage. They learned to stand up to peer pressure, to question authority appropriately, and to support each other through difficult times. Their growth as a group reflected the kind of community Hannah had always tried to build. The staff at Cedar Grove underwent a collective transformation. From feeling helpless in the face of corruption, they developed a quiet strength and determination to protect the children in their care. Each small act of resistance built their confidence and reinforced their commitment to Hannah's values. The investigation took a darker turn when David began connecting financial transactions from St. Matthew's Church to a network of international adoption agencies. Each agency had pristine public records, but their transaction histories revealed a pattern of children being processed through multiple countries before disappearing completely. The amounts changing hands far exceeded normal adoption fees, suggesting something far more sinister. Hannah's research, meticulously documented in her encrypted files, had traced connections to high-level political figures. Mayor Wilson's monthly golf games weren't just social occasions, they were meetings with state officials and prominent business leaders who all had ties to the suspicious charitable foundations. Bank records showed large donations flowing into church accounts immediately after these gatherings. Sister Mary Catherine's recovery brought new revelations. During her hospital stay, she recalled conversations between Father Michael and visitors speaking foreign languages, discussing shipments and merchandise. Her detailed descriptions of these visitors matched reports from other communities where children had vanished from church-run facilities. Officer Reynolds discovered that several of his fellow officers had received significant promotions or transfers shortly after key children disappeared from Cedar Grove. These officers all had connections to a private security firm that provided consultation services to the church. The firm's owner had ties to international trafficking organizations known to law enforcement. The mystery deepened when David found Hannah's last video recording hidden in Sarah's teddy bear. Hannah had documented a conversation between Father Michael and two well-dressed men discussing special orders and specific requirements. The men's expensive watches and subtle security details suggested connections to wealthy private clients. Maria Rodriguez's network uncovered a pattern of similar operations in other churches across the state. Each location had the same elements: a charismatic religious leader, strong political connections, and a steady stream of vulnerable children passing through their care. The coordination between these operations suggested an organized network rather than isolated incidents. Tom Bradley's maintenance records revealed modifications to church buildings that made no logical sense: hidden rooms, soundproof basements, and security systems far beyond normal requirements. More disturbing were the delivery records showing medical supplies being brought to these locations late at night. Dr. Sullivan's investigation into Duke's poisoning led to a disturbing discovery. The drugs used were military-grade compounds available only through restricted channels. This suggested connections to government or military personnel, adding another layer to the already complex web of involvement. The children's testimonies painted a picture of careful selection. Those chosen for transfer fit specific profiles: certain ages, physical characteristics, or abilities. Sarah remembered conversations between Hannah and the children, where her mother seemed to be gathering information about these selection patterns. Eleanor's library research uncovered historical patterns going back decades. Similar operations had been exposed in other countries, always involving religious organizations, powerful political figures, and international adoption agencies. The similarities to current events in Millbrook were undeniable. Financial records obtained through Michael Roberts showed a sophisticated money laundering operation. Donations were cycled through multiple charitable foundations, emerging as clean investments in legitimate businesses. These businesses, in turn, provided services to the trafficking operation: transportation, security, and medical care. The international connections became clearer when David traced shipping manifests from local ports. Children's names appeared on passenger lists for private flights, but their destinations were obscured through a series of transfers and redirections. The pattern suggested professional expertise in evading immigration controls. Local business owners who supported the investigation began noticing connections between their legitimate competitors and the church's operations. Companies that thrived despite poor business practices often had financial ties to Father Michael's network. These businesses provided cover for moving people and money undetected. The mystery took on new urgency when David discovered references to special requests in Father Michael's private correspondence. These messages, carefully coded, suggested that some children were being selected for specific buyers with particular preferences. The implications were too horrifying to ignore. Betty Anderson's late-night patrons provided pieces of overheard conversations that filled in crucial gaps. Truck drivers, security guards, and cleaning staff shared stories of unusual activities at seemingly ordinary locations throughout the region. Their observations created a map of the trafficking network's infrastructure. The first major breakthrough came during a violent thunderstorm that knocked out power to St. Matthew's Church. In the darkness, David and Officer Reynolds discovered that the church's emergency generator powered only specific areas, including a hidden section of the basement not shown on any building plans. Behind a false wall, they found a room containing medical equipment and recently used cots, confirming their worst fears about children being held there. Hannah's presence in the investigation suddenly shifted from memory to reality when Sarah recognized her mother's handwriting on documents hidden within the church office. The papers detailed a complex operation involving multiple facilities and included recent dates suggesting Hannah was alive when these notes were written. Security camera footage from a gas station outside town had captured images of someone matching Hannah's description being forced into a black SUV 3 days before her supposed death. Duke's behavior during the funeral took on new meaning when David found traces of a powerful sedative in samples from the coffin. The dog hadn't been reacting to Hannah's body. He had detected the drugs used to fake her death. Dr. Sullivan's analysis confirmed the same compound had been found in Hannah's coffee cup the morning she allegedly died. The investigation accelerated when Sister Mary Catherine discovered a hidden safe behind the altar. Inside were detailed ledgers connecting church donations to specific children, along with photographs documenting their processing through various facilities. The evidence implicated not just Father Michael, but dozens of prominent community members who had profited from the trafficking operation. A crucial piece fell into place when David identified the source of the offshore transactions. A series of shell companies, all registered to addresses connected to Mayor Wilson's family, had been moving millions of dollars through accounts disguised as charitable donations. The paper trail led to luxury properties and private islands where wealthy clients could inspect potential acquisitions. Eleanor's methodical review of library records revealed a pattern in the disappearances. Children vanished in groups of 3 or 4, always following large deposits into the church's accounts and visits from specific out-of-town benefactors. Her documentation provided crucial timeline evidence connecting the money to the missing children. The breakthrough in locating Hannah came through Maria Rodriguez's network. A cleaning worker at a private medical facility 30 miles away reported seeing a woman matching Hannah's description being moved between rooms under guard. Security footage obtained by Officer Reynolds confirmed Hannah was being held there, heavily sedated but alive. Tom Bradley's maintenance records proved invaluable when cross-referenced with shipping manifests. The dates of his ordered modifications to church buildings aligned perfectly with the arrival and departure of groups of children. His detailed notes included vehicle descriptions and partial license plates that helped identify the transportation network. Sarah's contribution to the breakthrough came from her memory of overheard conversations. She recalled specific code words used by Father Michael when discussing special transfers with his visitors. These phrases, when searched in Hannah's encrypted files, revealed a sophisticated system for categorizing and pricing children based on their characteristics. The investigation gained unstoppable momentum when Dr. Sullivan discovered medical records hidden in Father Michael's private office. The files contained detailed health assessments of children who had passed through Cedar Grove, with notations about their market value and potential buyers. This evidence provided the concrete proof needed to involve federal authorities. Betty's diner proved crucial to the breakthrough when her security cameras captured a late-night meeting between Father Michael and known human traffickers. The footage showed explicit discussions of prices and merchandise quality, leaving no doubt about the nature of their business relationship. Frank Miller's hardware store surveillance system recorded key evidence of children being moved through the church's back entrance during night services. The timestamps on these recordings matched perfectly with Hannah's documented disappearances and financial transactions. The final piece of evidence surfaced in Hannah's last video recording, where she detailed the entire operation, including names, dates, and locations. She had recorded it the night before her death, ensuring the truth would emerge, even if something happened to her. The video included footage of Father Michael discussing prices with international buyers. Officer Reynolds' breakthrough in the police department came when he discovered a hidden file of complaints that had been deliberately buried. Each report detailed suspicious activities at the church, but all had been marked as resolved. by officers who had received substantial payments from church-affiliated organizations. These major breakthroughs transformed the investigation from a series of suspicious circumstances into an ironclad case. The evidence was overwhelming, documenting years of systematic exploitation protected by a network of powerful individuals. Most importantly, it proved Hannah was alive and provided the key to finding her. The investigation took a deeply personal turn when David discovered a direct connection between Hannah's case and Rachel's murder. Hidden in Father Michael's private files was a photograph of Rachel meeting with Hannah 6 months before her death. The timestamp showed it was taken at St. Catherine's Church, the location Rachel had mentioned in her final voicemail. They hadn't been working on separate cases, they had been closing in on the same network from different angles. Sarah's involvement became more dangerous after she recognized one of Father Michael's frequent visitors as the man who had been watching her at school. The next day, an attempt was made to force her into an unmarked car during recess. Only Duke's timely intervention and her own quick thinking prevented her abduction. The incident made it clear that the trafficking operation viewed her as both a threat and a potential target. Eleanor faced a mother's worst nightmare when she found evidence that Hannah's death had been planned weeks in advance. Among Hannah's papers was a letter addressed to her mother, explaining that if anything happened, Sarah's safety had to come first. The letter included detailed instructions about evidence hidden throughout their house and a warning that the organization would stop at nothing to silence them. Officer Reynolds discovered his own family had been under surveillance. Photographs of his wife and children at school, shopping, and playing in their backyard were found in a file marked "Leverage the implied threat." Was clear his continued investigation put his family at risk. Rather than backing down, he moved his family to a safe location and doubled his efforts to expose the truth. Duke's role became more crucial when David realized the dog's injuries weren't random. Records in Rachel's files referenced a K-9 unit that had gotten too close to the trafficking operation in Boston. The dates matched Duke's approximate age and injuries, suggesting he had been deliberately targeted for his role in a previous investigation. His presence in Millbrook wasn't coincidence. He had been protecting Hannah long before David arrived. Dr. Sullivan's personal stake escalated when she found her name on a list in Father Michael's office. Next to it were details about her sister, who had disappeared 20 years ago in circumstances similar to the current cases. The revelation transformed her from a supportive ally into someone seeking answers to her own family tragedy. Betty Anderson discovered her late husband had been involved in the early stages of the trafficking operation. His sudden heart attack 10 years ago came immediately after he had threatened to expose the network. The knowledge that her beloved spouse had died trying to stop what they were now fighting gave her mission a profound personal significance. Frank Miller's teenage daughter became a target when surveillance photos of her appeared on Father Michael's desk. The implicit threat sent him into a rage, but it also helped him understand the desperation of parents whose children had disappeared. His commitment to supporting the investigation deepened, driven by both anger and empathy. Maria Rodriguez learned that her cousin's child, who had disappeared from a church-run orphanage in Mexico, had passed through Millbrook's trafficking network. The discovery that she had been unknowingly working in a facility connected to her own family's tragedy filled her with both guilt and determination. Sister Mary Catherine faced a crisis of faith when she found evidence that her mentor, the previous priest, had not retired as claimed. His attempts to expose the trafficking operation had led to his accident and replacement by Father Michael. Her spiritual struggle became entwined with a deep need to honor her mentor's sacrifice. Tom Bradley's maintenance records revealed that his own workplace modifications had unknowingly facilitated the trafficking operation. The knowledge that his skills had been used to harm children tormented him, driving him to document everything meticulously in an effort to make amends. The personal stakes extended to the entire Cedar Grove staff as they realized many of their former charges had been specifically targeted by the trafficking network. Each missing child had a name, a face, and a story. Their disappearances were no longer statistics, but personal failures that haunted the staff. Sarah's school friends began receiving threats warning them to distance themselves from her. Their parents faced professional and personal pressure to keep their children away. Those who stood by Sarah did so knowing they were putting their own families at risk, transforming playground friendships into bonds forged by shared danger. The investigation became a race against time when David discovered a planned transfer schedule in Father Michael's files. The list included names of children currently at Cedar Grove, with Sarah's name specifically highlighted. The organization was planning to eliminate loose ends before moving operations elsewhere. The turning point in community awareness came during a Sunday service when Sister Mary Catherine stood up and interrupted Father Michael's sermon. In a clear, steady voice, she began reading from her documentation of missing children. The congregation sat in stunned silence as she listed names, dates, and the amounts paid for each child. When security tried to remove her, a dozen parishioners formed a protective circle around her, demanding answers. Betty's Diner became the epicenter of community resistance. What began as hushed conversations over coffee evolved into open planning sessions. Local parents brought photographs of children who had disappeared over the years, creating a wall of faces that could no longer be ignored. The visual impact of so many missing children forced the community to confront the magnitude of what had happened in their town. The Millbrook Gazette broke its silence with a front-page expose. Margaret Stevens, risking her career and safety, published a detailed account of Hannah's investigation and the evidence of trafficking. The article included testimonies from former Cedar Grove staff and families of missing children. Local businesses that had previously pulled their advertising rallied to support the paper, marking a shift in community allegiance. A town hall meeting erupted into chaos when David presented evidence of Mayor Wilson's involvement. Security camera footage showed the mayor escorting children to waiting vehicles late at night. As the images played on the screen, several audience members recognized their missing relatives. The mayor's attempts to dismiss the evidence were drowned out by angry shouts from previously supportive citizens. The local school board faced unprecedented pressure when parents began sharing stories of attempted abductions and suspicious incidents involving their children. Teachers came forward with accounts of being pressured to ignore warning signs. The revelation that several board members had received donations from church-affiliated organizations led to mass resignations and demands for investigation. Cedar Grove became a symbol of community redemption as volunteers flooded in to support the remaining children. Local businesses that had previously shunned the orphanage now offered jobs, donations, and protection. The sight of community members standing guard outside the facility demonstrated the shift from passive acceptance to active resistance. Officer Reynolds' evidence of police corruption triggered a wave of internal reform. Junior officers, emboldened by public support, began reporting incidents they had previously been ordered to ignore. The police department's complicity in covering up disappearances became a rallying point for community demands for accountability. The awakening spread to other churches in the region as congregations began questioning their own leadership. Sister Mary Catherine's testimony inspired other religious workers to examine financial records and suspicious activities in their organizations. A network of whistleblowers emerged, each contributing pieces to the larger picture of corruption. Local business owners, who had been intimidated into silence, found strength in numbers. Frank Miller organized a merchants' association dedicated to supporting the investigation. Members shared security footage, reported suspicious activities, and provided safe spaces for witnesses to come forward. Their unified stance demonstrated the community's rejection of the trafficking network's influence. The Hispanic community, led by Maria Rodriguez, organized protests outside the church and town hall. Their testimonies about missing children and threatened families resonated with other marginalized groups who had been afraid to speak out. The protests grew as more community members recognized their shared vulnerability to exploitation. Dr. Sullivan's veterinary clinic became a hub for community healing as she shared her discoveries about Duke's past and the broader implications of the trafficking operation. Pet owners who had dismissed earlier warnings now became active participants in neighborhood watch programs, their animals adding another layer of protection for vulnerable children. The library, under Eleanor's guidance, became a repository for community documentation of suspicious activities. Residents brought photographs, letters, and records they had kept out of fear or uncertainty. The growing archive provided irrefutable evidence of the community's unwitting role in enabling the trafficking operation. Sarah's school underwent a transformation as students and teachers united against intimidation. The bullying that had initially isolated her evolved into a student movement demanding transparency and protection. Young people who had been taught to ignore uncomfortable truths began actively questioning authority and supporting each other. Tom Bradley's maintenance records sparked a wave of similar revelations from other service workers. Cleaners, delivery drivers, and maintenance staff began sharing their observations of suspicious activities. Their combined testimony created a detailed map of how the trafficking operation had used everyday business operations as cover. The community awakening culminated in a candlelight vigil for all missing children. What began as a small gathering grew into a town-wide demonstration of solidarity. As families shared stories of lost loved ones, the community's collective grief transformed into determination to prevent future trafficking and protect their most vulnerable members. The crushing blow came on a rainy Tuesday night when St. Matthew's Church erupted in flames. The fire, deliberately set, targeted the areas containing crucial evidence. David and Officer Reynolds could only watch helplessly as years of financial records, photographs, and documents were reduced to ashes. The fire department, still under Mayor Wilson's influence, arrived suspiciously late, and their report quickly labeled it an electrical accident. The coordinated attack extended beyond the church. Simultaneously, break-ins occurred at every location housing copies of evidence. The hardware store security cameras were destroyed, Betty's diner was vandalized, and Dr. Sullivan's clinic was ransacked. Most devastating was the theft of Hannah's original documents from Eleanor's carefully guarded library archive. The precision of the operation suggested inside knowledge of their evidence storage locations. Cedar Grove faced an immediate crisis when state inspectors arrived unannounced, armed with fabricated reports of health and safety violations. The children were ordered to be relocated within 24 hours. Despite protests from staff and community supporters, official-looking vehicles began arriving to transport the children to approved facilities. The documentation authorizing these transfers appeared flawless, bearing the signatures of judges and officials who would later deny any knowledge of the orders. Duke's condition deteriorated rapidly after he intercepted a masked intruder at Sarah's house. The poison used was more sophisticated than the previous attempt, leaving Dr. Sullivan struggling to save his life. The dog's incapacitation removed a crucial layer of protection from their most vulnerable allies, and his suffering served as a clear message about the consequences of resistance. The investigation's digital evidence vanished overnight. Encrypted files were corrupted, backup drives were wiped clean, and cloud storage accounts were mysteriously deleted. Years of carefully gathered documentation disappeared, leaving them without the technological trail that had connected individual crimes to the larger trafficking network. Officer Reynolds faced suspension after being framed for evidence tampering. Internal Affairs launched an investigation based on manufactured evidence showing him accepting bribes. His reputation within the department was systematically destroyed, and his previous testimony was called into question. The message to other officers was clear: support the investigation, and your career would be destroyed. Sarah's safety became critically compromised when the court suddenly ordered her removal from Eleanor's custody. Using manufactured concerns about her grandmother's mental stability, the trafficking network attempted to legally gain control of Hannah's daughter. The court order came from a judge known to be under Mayor Wilson's influence, making legal resistance nearly impossible. Father Michael's influence proved more extensive than they had imagined. Within hours of the fire, media outlets began running stories discrediting David and his allies. Anonymous sources provided fabricated evidence suggesting the investigation was a conspiracy to damage the church's reputation. The carefully crafted narrative painted them as attention-seeking troublemakers who had endangered children with false allegations. The community's support wavered in the face of economic pressure. Businesses that had backed the investigation found their loans called in, licenses questioned, and customers threatened. Longtime supporters began distancing themselves, afraid of losing their livelihoods. The unified resistance they had built started showing cracks as fear and self-preservation took hold. Sister Mary Catherine disappeared after leaving the hospital, her room showing signs of a struggle. Her detailed testimony about church activities vanished with her, and rumors spread that she had recanted her accusations before vanishing. Her absence dealt a significant blow to their credibility and removed a key witness to the trafficking operation's inner workings. Maria Rodriguez and her network of informants faced deportation threats and workplace intimidation. The systematic pressure forced many to choose between continuing their support of the investigation and protecting their families. The loss of their intelligence network left David blind to the trafficking operations movements. Betty's Diner, their central meeting point and operations base, suffered a devastating health code violation that forced its temporary closure. The timing and nature of the inspection made it clear that their enemies were cutting off their ability to coordinate resistance. Without this safe space, their coalition began to fragment. The apparent defeat reached its nadir when David discovered his own past being used against him. Records of his dismissal from the Boston Police Department were leaked to local media, along with fabricated evidence suggesting his investigation was motivated by personal vendetta rather than evidence. His credibility was systematically dismantled, making it easier for the community to dismiss his findings. Sarah's disappearance struck like a thunderbolt on an ordinary school morning. One moment she was walking into Millbrook Middle School, the next she had vanished. Security cameras mysteriously malfunctioned and witnesses gave conflicting accounts. Eleanor's anguished screams echoed through the school hallways as she clutched her granddaughter's abandoned backpack, its contents scattered across the floor, a deliberate message that no one was beyond their reach. David's professional destruction came systematically. Anonymous sources leaked fabricated evidence suggesting he had tampered with crime scenes in Boston, casting doubt on his entire career. His private investigator's license was suspended pending investigation. Former colleagues, pressured by unseen forces, came forward with false testimonies about his mental stability. The campaign transformed him from a credible investigator into a disgraced officer pursuing conspiracy theories. Duke's condition worsened despite Dr. Sullivan's best efforts. The poison had been carefully chosen, causing a slow, painful decline that forced them to watch helplessly as their loyal protector suffered. Each labored breath served as a reminder of their vulnerability and the ruthlessness of their opponents. The message was clear: even their most faithful allies could be taken from them. Eleanor's world crumbled in layers. First came Sarah's abduction, then the court order declaring her mentally unfit for guardianship. Her position at the library was terminated, citing concerns about her stability. Decades of community respect evaporated as whispers about her delusions spread through town. The grandmother who had stood as a pillar of strength found herself isolated and discredited. Officer Reynolds paid the highest professional price when evidence emerged linking him to drug trafficking. The accusations were clearly fabricated, but the department moved swiftly to arrest him. His family, already in hiding, lost their protection when his assets were frozen. His teenage son's college acceptance was mysteriously rescinded, while his wife's nursing license came under review. Betty Anderson lost more than her diner to the health code violations. Her insurance claim was denied and the bank began foreclosure proceedings. Decades of serving the community ended in bankruptcy. More painfully, her husband's reputation was posthumously attacked with false evidence suggesting he had been involved in money laundering, tarnishing the memory she had fought to protect. Dr. Sullivan's professional devastation began with anonymous complaints to the veterinary board. Former clients came forward with fabricated stories of malpractice. Her clinic's insurance was canceled and suppliers refused deliveries. The final blow came when her sister's case was permanently closed, the file sealed by court order, destroying her hope of ever learning the truth about her family's tragedy. Maria Rodriguez faced the cruelest choice when immigration agents appeared at her door. They offered a simple ultimatum: withdraw her testimony about the trafficking operation or watch her entire extended family face deportation. The weight of responsibility for dozens of relatives forced her to publicly recant her statements, though the truth burned inside her. Frank Miller's hardware store, a family business spanning 3 generations, succumbed to a coordinated attack. Building code violations appeared from nowhere, suppliers canceled contracts, and long-term customers vanished. The final blow came when his daughter's college scholarship was revoked, the message clear that their punishment would extend across generations. Tom Bradley's expertise in maintenance turned against him when falsified records suggested he had deliberately created unsafe conditions at Cedar Grove. His contractor's license was suspended, and past clients were encouraged to file complaints. The skills he had used to help children were now being used to paint him as a danger to them. Sister Mary Catherine's disappearance carried darker implications when evidence was planted suggesting she had embezzled church funds and fled. Her lifetime of service was erased by carefully crafted lies, her warnings about the trafficking operation dismissed as the delusions of a guilty conscience. Her absence left a void in their spiritual foundation. The Cedar Grove staff watched helplessly as their children were dispersed to various facilities. Each transfer felt like a personal failure, knowing the likely fate awaiting these vulnerable young lives. The empty rooms and silent playgrounds stood as monuments to their inability to protect those in their care. David's investigation into Rachel's death suffered a devastating setback when key evidence disappeared from police storage. Years of careful documentation vanished overnight, replaced by files suggesting his wife's death had been a simple accident. The official closure of her case eliminated any legal means of continuing the investigation. Father Michael's apparent victory manifested in a grand Sunday service, where he stood triumphant before a packed congregation. His sermon, dripping with false humility, spoke of forgiveness for those who had slandered the church. The pews were filled with familiar faces, people who had once supported the investigation but now sat with downcast eyes, their silence purchased with threats or bribes. Outside, security guards wearing crosses prevented David and his remaining allies from entering. The police department's corruption revealed itself fully when Officer Reynolds was paraded through town in handcuffs. His former colleagues, some visibly uncomfortable, followed orders to make the arrest as public and humiliating as possible. The local newspaper, now under complete control of Mayor Wilson's supporters, published a front-page story detailing his alleged crimes, complete with manufactured evidence and false witness statements. Hannah's voice was silenced again when a suicide note surfaced, meticulously forged but bearing her authentic-looking signature. The note confessed to fabricating evidence against the church due to mental instability, effectively discrediting years of her careful documentation. But Eleanor, fighting through her own grief over Sarah's disappearance, watched helplessly as her daughter's reputation was posthumously destroyed. Cedar Grove's transformation cut deepest. The once vibrant children's home became a hollow shell. New management, appointed by church authorities, began renovating the building for administrative purposes. The children's belongings were discarded, their personal histories erased. The garden Hannah had lovingly tended was paved over for additional parking, symbolically burying her legacy. The town council meeting marked the public collapse of resistance. Mayor Wilson, emboldened by Father Michael's success, proposed new ordinances restricting public gatherings and implementing surveillance measures for community safety. The few council members who might have opposed these changes were notably absent, their seats filled by hastily appointed replacements with connections to the church. David's last attempt to rally support ended in disaster when his public presentation of evidence was sabotaged. The projector failed, speakers malfunctioned, and his backup drives were corrupted. As he stood before a dwindling audience, Father Michael's supporters distributed documents detailing his history of mental instability. The meeting ended with David being escorted out by security, his credibility in tatters. Duke's condition reached its critical point in Dr. Sullivan's clinic. The loyal dog, who had protected so many, lay fighting for his life as the last supplies of antidote ran out. Suppliers refused to provide more medication, and other veterinarians declined to assist, fearing retribution. His labored breathing became a countdown to their defeat. Sarah's absence created an unbearable void. Eleanor wandered the empty house, touching her granddaughter's belongings, while search parties dwindled and official investigations stalled. The few community members still willing to help were systematically intimidated into stopping. Missing person posters were torn down as quickly as they were put up. Betty's diner, once the heart of their resistance, stood empty and dark. Auction notices covered the windows and chain locks secured the doors. The gathering place that had housed their hopes and plans became another testament to the price of opposing the trafficking operation. The for sale sign swung in the wind, its creaking a reminder of their isolation. The support system's breakdown became complete when Maria Rodriguez's entire network went silent. Families disappeared overnight, leaving homes and jobs abandoned. Those who remained refused eye contact on the streets, hurrying past with fear-filled glances over their shoulders. The community's immigrant population, once a vital source of information, was effectively silenced. Frank Miller's hardware store, Their last operational base received a final blow when building inspectors declared it structurally unsafe. As he carried boxes of David's investigation files out of his office, neighbors who had known him for decades turned away, hurrying past without acknowledgement. The boards going up over his windows felt like seals on a tomb. Dr. Sullivan faced her darkest professional moment when the veterinary board suspended her license. As she packed up her clinic, she discovered that even her personal records about Duke's poisoning had been stolen, eliminating crucial evidence of the trafficking operation's methods. Her years of professional service ended in forced silence. Sister Mary Catherine's disappearance grew darker when evidence suggested she had been relocated to a remote monastery. Letters in her handwriting, obviously coerced, spoke of her spiritual recovery and retracted all allegations against Father Michael. Her silencing represented the crushing of their last connection to the church's inner circle. The final blow came when David discovered his room at the hardware store had been completely cleaned out, years of investigation files, photographs, and evidence gone. A single photograph remained on his desk: Sarah, Hannah, and Duke together at Cedar Grove, their happy faces now a haunting reminder of everything they had lost. On the back was written a simple message: give up or lose them forever. Salvation came through Sarah's teddy bear, the one constant companion Hannah had insisted her daughter keep close. When Eleanor was packing away her granddaughter's belongings, she noticed something odd about the bear's weight. Inside its stuffing, Sarah had hidden a small digital recorder. Hannah had taught her daughter well. The device contained recordings of every conversation in their home for the past 3 months, including damning discussions between Father Michael and his conspirators about moving special merchandise. The second revelation emerged from an unlikely source: Tommy Martinez's old comic book collection at Cedar Grove. Between the pages, the observant child had sketched detailed maps of the church basement, including hidden rooms and secret passages. More importantly, he had documented license plate numbers, dates, and descriptions of men who came to inspect potential candidates for trafficking. His childish handwriting provided better surveillance notes than most police reports. Duke's military background yielded unexpected evidence when Dr. Sullivan finally decoded his identification tattoo. The number led to classified records about a K-9 unit that had been investigating trafficking operations in Boston. The files, accessed through David's former police contacts, contained photographs linking Father Michael to similar operations in other cities, along with details about Rachel's murder investigation. Betty Anderson's traditional habit of keeping customer receipts proved invaluable. Hidden beneath decades of paper records were carbon copies of credit card transactions showing regular payments from shell companies to church accounts. The dates matched perfectly with children's disappearances, creating an irrefutable financial trail. Her meticulous bookkeeping had unknowingly documented years of trafficking operations. Officer Reynolds' young son provided critical evidence through his hobby of photographing cars. His Instagram account contained hundreds of pictures of cool vehicles outside the church, inadvertently documenting suspicious vehicles and their occupants. The timestamps and locations created a detailed map of trafficking operations that even professional surveillance hadn't captured. Maria Rodriguez's kitchen diary, written in a mix of Spanish and English, contained more than recipes. Between instructions for tamales and notes about spices were detailed observations about late-night visitors to Cedar Grove, including conversations she had overheard while cleaning. Her descriptions of visitors matched known trafficking operatives from international watch lists. The breakthrough in locating Hannah came through Sister Mary Catherine's hidden journal, discovered behind a loose brick in the church garden. She had documented every conversation, meeting, and suspicious activity for years, including details about Hannah's captivity. The journal revealed she was being held in a private medical facility disguised as a rehabilitation center. Frank Miller's security cameras had been smarter than anyone realized. While the obvious cameras were destroyed, he had installed a secondary system that uploaded footage directly to a secure cloud server. The backup recording showed Father Michael and Mayor Wilson discussing operations in detail, including specific mentions of prices and destinations for trafficked children. Tom Bradley's maintenance records held vital evidence in plain sight. His work orders, when decoded, revealed a pattern of building modifications designed to temporarily hold children before transport. More importantly, his careful documentation of materials and labor created a paper trail connecting church funds to human trafficking infrastructure. A crucial piece of evidence emerged from Eleanor's library records. Her system of tracking borrowed books revealed that certain volumes had been repeatedly checked out by church staff. These books, apparently innocent religious texts, contained handwritten notes in their margins detailing meeting times, payment amounts, and delivery schedules. The children at Cedar Grove had been more observant than their captors realized. A collection of artwork, saved by a sympathetic teacher, contained drawings that documented trafficking activities through young eyes. Names, faces, and events were recorded in crayon and marker, providing testimony that would be difficult to discredit. Dr. Sullivan's medical records held another key piece of evidence. Her detailed documentation of Duke's injuries matched patterns seen in other cases where trafficking operations had been violently protected. The specific toxins used in his poisoning were traced to suppliers with direct connections to Father Michael's network. Sarah's school assignments, seemingly innocent essays and projects, contained coded messages Hannah had taught her to write. When properly decoded, they revealed detailed information about the trafficking operation, including names, dates, and locations. Her mother had turned her homework into an unbreakable intelligence system. The final piece of hidden evidence came from Hannah herself. She had created a complex scavenger hunt throughout Millbrook, each clue leading to another piece of evidence. The trail, which only Sarah could have followed, led to a complete backup of all her investigation files, stored in a place so obvious that no one had thought to look a safety deposit box registered to Duke's veterinary records. Father Michael's true identity unraveled when David connected him to a series of shuttered orphanages across 3 states. He wasn't a priest at all, but Michael Pearson, a former corporate lawyer who had specialized in international adoptions before his disbarment. His religious credentials were expertly forged, and his installation at St. Matthew's had been orchestrated by the trafficking network to provide legitimate cover for their operations. The mayor's involvement proved deeper than anyone suspected. Wilson wasn't just accepting bribes, he was a key architect of the entire operation. His construction company had built specialized holding facilities disguised as church youth centers across the state. His wife's charitable foundation served as the primary money laundering vehicle, converting trafficking profits into legitimate-looking donations. Hannah's survival had been part of a calculated plan. The network had kept her alive to force her cooperation in their financial operations, using Sarah's safety as leverage. Her apparent death had been staged using drugs supplied by a corrupt medical examiner, while she was secretly moved between facilities to maintain their books and create legitimate-looking paper trails. David's former partner, James Cooper, emerged as a double agent. While appearing to warn David away from the investigation, he had actually been gathering evidence for a federal task force. His apparent betrayal had been a cover, allowing him to collect crucial evidence about the trafficking network's connections within law enforcement. Duke's origins revealed a deeper connection to the case. He had been part of a K-9 unit investigating the same trafficking network in Boston, working with Rachel before her murder. His injuries came from protecting her during the attack that claimed her life. Hannah's discovery of him was no accident. He had been tracking the network that killed his former handler. Officer Reynolds had been working undercover for state police for months before David arrived. His apparent rookie status was a carefully constructed facade, allowing him to document corruption within the Millbrook Police Department. His family's relocation had been part of a witness protection program, not just a safety measure. Sister Mary Catherine's disappearance took on new meaning when she was revealed to be a former prosecutor who had gone undercover in the church after her own daughter vanished. Her position as a nun had allowed her to gather evidence while searching for trafficking victims, including her child. Her apparent crisis of faith had been a carefully maintained cover story. Sarah's role in the investigation proved more crucial than anyone had realized. Hannah had trained her daughter from an early age to be an observer and record keeper. Every playdate, every school activity, had been an opportunity to gather intelligence about the trafficking operation. Her apparent innocence had made her an ideal undercover operative. Eleanor's quiet librarian persona masked a background in military intelligence. Her systematic documentation of church activities drew on years of experience in data analysis. The library's interlibrary loan system had been her cover for communicating with law enforcement agencies investigating similar operations in other cities. Betty Anderson's role expanded beyond that of a sympathetic diner owner. Her late husband had been an FBI informant, and she had continued his work after his death. Her restaurant's strategic location and regular customers had provided perfect cover for monitoring church activities. Every coffee refill had been an opportunity to gather intelligence. Dr. Sullivan's connection to the case went beyond treating Duke. Her sister's disappearance years ago had led her to join an underground network of professionals tracking trafficking operations. Her veterinary practice provided cover for documenting suspicious injuries and collecting evidence of abuse. Maria Rodriguez revealed herself as a former journalist who had been investigating trafficking networks in Central America. Her position as Cedar Grove's cook had allowed her to document the operation while building trust with potential witnesses. Her network of informants extended far beyond Millbrook's borders. Frank Miller's hardware store operation masked sophisticated surveillance equipment disguised as ordinary security cameras. His background in military communications had enabled him to create an independent monitoring system that documented years of trafficking activities. His apparent simple shopkeeper persona had been carefully crafted. Tom Bradley's maintenance work concealed his role as a former structural engineer specializing in uncovering hidden construction modifications. His detailed records of church renovations had actually been professional analysis of how the buildings were modified to conceal trafficking operations. Every repair job had been an opportunity to gather evidence. The confrontation began at midnight in St. Matthew's Church basement. David, Officer Reynolds, and a recovered Duke tracked Sarah's location through the hidden GPS in her teddy bear. They found Father Michael preparing to move the latest group of trafficked children, including Sarah, through the underground tunnel system. Hannah was there too, held at gunpoint by the mayor's security team, being forced to finalize the transfer documentation. The church's security system had been compromised from within by Sister Mary Catherine, who had spent months memorizing patrol patterns and disabling key sensors. As David's team moved through the shadows, Betty Anderson's network of informants created diversions around town, drawing away the corrupt police officers who normally protected these transfers. Frank Miller's surveillance system provided real-time intelligence, tracking movement through the church complex. Maria Rodriguez's kitchen staff, actually composed of undercover agents, had positioned themselves at key exits. Tom Bradley's detailed knowledge of the building's layout allowed them to seal off escape routes one by one. Father Michael's mask of piety finally cracked when he realized he was trapped. His cruel efficiency emerged as he tried to bargain with human lives, offering to trade children for safe passage. The refined accent of Michael Pearson, disbarred lawyer, replaced the humble tones of Father Michael as he revealed the full scope of his operation and its powerful protectors. Sarah proved her mother's daughter when she chose her moment to act. Using the self-defense techniques Hannah had taught her, she created chaos among the guards, allowing Duke to attack. The dog's military training came into full play as he targeted specific threats, creating openings for David and Reynolds to advance. The mayor arrived with reinforcements, but found himself facing an army of parents and community members at every entrance. Betty Anderson had mobilized her customers, Frank Miller had rallied local business owners, and Maria Rodriguez had brought together families of disappeared children. The community's presence prevented any official intervention to stop the raid. Hannah seized her opportunity during the confusion, using her knowledge of the operation's documentation to quickly gather crucial evidence. Years of forced cooperation had given her intimate knowledge of the trafficking network structure, and she knew exactly which papers would expose the entire operation. Eleanor coordinated with state police from the library's computer system, using her military intelligence background to direct resources where they were most needed. Her carefully maintained network of contacts ensured that no corrupt official could intervene without exposure. The final confrontation in the church basement became a battle of evidence rather than violence. Every attempt by Father Michael to destroy documents was countered by proof already secured through the combined efforts of the investigation team. His threats of powerful retribution were met with revelations of his true identity and crimes. Dr. Sullivan arrived with the final piece of evidence, Duke's complete medical records, linking the attempt on his life directly to the mayor's security team. The documentation provided the connection needed to prove conspiracy and attempted murder, adding to the trafficking charges. Sister Mary Catherine emerged from hiding at the crucial moment, her testimony ready and her evidence secured with multiple federal agencies. Her years of undercover work had created an unbreakable chain of evidence leading from Millbrook to international trafficking networks. The corrupted police officers who arrived hoping to protect the operation found themselves facing their own colleagues from state and federal agencies. Officer Reynolds' undercover work had identified every compromised member of local law enforcement, leaving them nowhere to hide. The community's presence grew stronger as news spread through Betty Anderson's network. Hundreds of Millbrook residents surrounded the church, their silent vigil preventing any possibility of the children being quietly removed. Their unity demonstrated how thoroughly the trafficking operation had lost its grip on the town. As dawn broke over St. Matthew's Church, Father Michael and Mayor Wilson were led away in handcuffs, their carefully constructed facade of respectability shattered. The rescued children were reunited with their families, while Sarah and Hannah embraced with Duke standing guard nearby, their long nightmare finally over. The trial of Father Michael Pearson became national news, exposing decades of trafficking operations hidden behind religious and charitable facades. The courthouse in Millbrook, usually quiet, was surrounded by media as survivors and families came forward to testify. Hannah's meticulous documentation, combined with Sister Mary Catherine's long-term surveillance, created an airtight case that extended far beyond their small town. Mayor Wilson's network of corruption unraveled spectacularly. His wife's charitable foundation was revealed as a sophisticated money laundering operation with connections to similar organizations across multiple states. The financial evidence Eleanor had gathered through library records provided prosecutors with a clear trail of transactions linking legitimate donations to trafficking operations. The international scope of the investigation led to coordinated raids across 3 continents. David's persistence had uncovered not just a local crime ring, but an entire network of trafficking operations disguised as adoption agencies and youth programs. The evidence gathered in Millbrook became the key to dismantling similar operations worldwide. Sarah's testimony proved particularly powerful. Her clear, detailed accounts of conversations she had overheard and activities she had witnessed left no doubt about the defendant's guilt. The jury was moved to tears by her description of how her mother had taught her to gather evidence while pretending to play, knowing the danger they faced. The police department underwent a complete overhaul. Officer Reynolds' undercover work had identified every corrupted officer, leading to multiple arrests and convictions. The evidence he had gathered revealed how the trafficking operation had systematically compromised law enforcement through a combination of bribes and blackmail. Cedar Grove was transformed under new leadership, with Hannah returning as director. The facility was redesigned with enhanced security systems, and new protocols were implemented to protect vulnerable children. The garden was restored, and a memorial wall was created to honor those who had been lost to the trafficking network. Betty Anderson's diner became a symbol of community resistance. The tables where evidence had been gathered and plans made were marked with small plaques, and the wall of missing children's photos was maintained as a reminder of why vigilance remained important. Her role in coordinating community response was recognized with a Civilian Service Award. Dr. Sullivan's clinic expanded to include a specialized unit for treating trauma survivors. Her experience with Duke's recovery was applied to helping others heal from their experiences. The clinic became a model for similar facilities nationwide, combining physical and emotional healing in a secure environment. The church underwent a complete reformation under new leadership. Sister Mary Catherine's testimony led to a thorough investigation of religious organizations used as covers for trafficking. New transparency requirements and financial oversight procedures were implemented across all affiliated institutions. Frank Miller's security innovations became the foundation for a new community protection network. His surveillance system was expanded to cover key areas of town, monitored by a committee of trusted community members. The hardware store became a training center for other communities implementing similar security measures. Maria Rodriguez's network evolved into a formal support system for families affected by trafficking. Her connections in multiple communities helped create safe houses and resource centers for survivors. The kitchen at Cedar Grove became a gathering place for healing and rebuilding broken trust. Tom Bradley's expertise was channeled into creating safer spaces for vulnerable children. His understanding of how buildings had been modified for trafficking helped develop new architectural guidelines for childcare facilities. His work ensured that future construction projects would prioritize security and transparency. Eleanor's library system was recognized nationally for its role in documenting and exposing organized crime. Her methods of gathering and organizing information became a model for other communities fighting corruption. The library expanded its research department to include resources for investigating suspicious activities. Duke received special recognition from law enforcement agencies for his role in both investigating and protecting against trafficking operations. His recovery and continued service inspired a program training other rescue dogs to work with traumatized children. His presence at Cedar Grove provided both security and comfort to new arrivals. Hannah and Sarah's reunion marked the beginning of their healing journey. They moved back into their home at Cedar Grove, where Sarah's bedroom remained untouched, waiting for her return. Duke kept constant watch over them, his protective instincts stronger than ever. Together they began rebuilding their lives, finding strength in their shared experiences and the knowledge that their ordeal had helped save countless others. David's path to healing started with finally solving Rachel's murder. The evidence uncovered in Millbrook provided the missing pieces to his wife's case, leading to the conviction of her killers. Finding justice for Rachel allowed him to begin moving forward, transforming his drive for vengeance into a commitment to protecting others. His relationship with Hannah and Sarah grew deeper, built on shared understanding and mutual support. Eleanor found peace in returning to her role as grandmother, this time without the weight of secrets and fear. Her library became a sanctuary where she helped other families document their stories and find resources for healing. The simple joy of reading bedtime stories to Sarah again helped heal the wounds of their separation. Officer Reynolds reunited with his family, who returned to Millbrook once the danger had passed. His children's pride in their father's role in exposing corruption helped heal the pain of their forced separation. His wife's support through the darkest times strengthened their marriage, and their home became a gathering place for other families rebuilding their lives. Duke's physical recovery paralleled his emotional healing. Dr. Sullivan's care restored his strength, while the love of his extended family, Hannah, Sarah, and David, helped heal his emotional scars. His protective instincts remained sharp, but the tension in his posture eased as he learned to trust that his family was finally safe. Betty Anderson transformed her diner into a place of healing and connection. The booth where David had spent countless hours became known as the Hope Seat, reserved for families working through their own recovery. Her cooking provided comfort to those still struggling, and her quiet strength supported many through their darkest moments. Dr. Sullivan found healing in helping others. Her clinic's expansion into trauma care allowed her to combine her veterinary skills with her understanding of recovery. Working with Duke and other therapy animals helped her process her own grief over her sister's disappearance, finding purpose in preventing similar tragedies. Sister Mary Catherine returned to a different kind of religious life, focusing on helping survivors reconcile their faith with their experiences. Her own journey from undercover investigator to spiritual counselor helped others navigate their complex relationships with trust and belief. Her honest conversations about doubt and recovery resonated with many struggling to rebuild their faith. Maria Rodriguez's healing came through strengthening community bonds. Her kitchen became a place where survivors could share their stories over traditional meals, finding comfort in both food and friendship. Teaching cooking skills to Cedar Grove residents helped them rebuild confidence and independence. Frank Miller found peace in teaching others to protect themselves. His hardware store evolved into a community center where he shared his knowledge of security and surveillance with other towns implementing similar programs. Working with young people interested in technology helped him move past the fear that had driven his initial involvement. Tom Bradley's healing process involved redesigning Cedar Grove spaces to promote safety and comfort. Each renovation project helped erase the memories of how the buildings had been misused, replacing them with thoughtful designs that prioritized the residents' well-being. His work became a physical manifestation of recovery. The children of Cedar Grove found healing through routine and stability. Art therapy, supervised by local volunteers, helped them express their experiences. Sports programs built confidence, while educational support helped them catch up on missed opportunities. Most importantly, they learned to trust adults again through consistent care and attention. Sarah's school friends who had stood by her through the darkest times became even closer, forming a support network that extended beyond their age group. Their shared experience of resistance and survival created bonds that helped all of them process their trauma and grow stronger. The community's healing process included regular gatherings where people could share their stories and support each other. Monthly potluck dinners at Cedar Grove became a tradition, bringing together survivors, supporters, and new residents in a celebration of resilience and recovery. Cedar Grove's transformation became a model for child protection facilities nationwide. Under Hannah's leadership, the home developed innovative security protocols and trauma-informed care practices. The garden, once destroyed, bloomed again with therapeutic spaces where children could heal and grow. Regular visitors from other facilities came to learn from their success, spreading Hannah's methods across the country. David and Hannah's marriage a year after the trial symbolized more than personal happiness. Their wedding at Cedar Grove, with Sarah as maid of honor and Duke as ring bearer, represented the community's renewal. Together, they established the Rachel Thompson Foundation, providing resources and support for investigating trafficking operations disguised as charitable organizations. The Millbrook Police Department's reformation set new standards for law enforcement accountability. Officer Reynolds' promotion to chief brought systematic changes in training and oversight. His emphasis on community policing and transparency rebuilt trust between residents and law enforcement. Regular audits and civilian oversight committees ensured the department remained uncorrupted. Betty's Diner evolved into a community center where weekly support groups met over coffee and pie. The wall of photographs once showing missing children now displayed success stories, graduates, weddings, and family reunions. Betty's cooking continued to comfort newcomers while her quiet wisdom helped guide others through their healing journeys. Eleanor's library system expanded to include a dedicated research center for investigating suspicious activities in charitable organizations. Her methodical approach to gathering and organizing information became standard practice for similar investigations nationwide. The library hosted regular workshops teaching other communities how to identify and document potential trafficking operations. Dr. Sullivan's clinic became a teaching facility where veterinarians learned to identify signs of animal abuse connected to human trafficking. Her work with Duke inspired a program pairing rescued dogs with trauma survivors, creating healing partnerships that benefited both species. The clinic's success led to similar programs across the country. Sarah's experience shaped her future as she grew into a powerful advocate for children's rights. Her school presentations about staying safe and speaking up inspired other young people to trust their instincts and report suspicious behavior. The self-defense classes she started for young girls became part of the school curriculum. Duke's legacy lived on through a specialized K-9 training program, preparing dogs to work with traumatized children. His gentle strength with Cedar Grove residents while maintaining protective alertness became the model for selecting and training therapy dogs with security capabilities. Each graduating class of dogs carried forward his spirit of protective service. Maria Rodriguez's kitchen program expanded into a vocational training center, teaching culinary skills to Cedar Grove residents and trafficking survivors. The catering business she established provided employment opportunities while generating funds for support services. Her cooking classes became therapeutic sessions where healing happened naturally over shared meals. Frank Miller's security innovations developed into a comprehensive community protection system. Regular workshops at the hardware store taught residents how to maintain awareness without succumbing to fear. His surveillance network, managed by a diverse community board, balanced security with privacy rights. Tom Bradley's architectural guidelines for safe spaces became industry standards for facilities serving vulnerable populations. His designs incorporated both physical security and emotional comfort, creating environments that promoted healing while ensuring protection. Each new building project incorporated lessons learned from Cedar Grove's transformation. The church, under new leadership, established strict financial transparency requirements and regular audits. The basement, once a place of terror, was converted into a community crisis center. Weekly interfaith gatherings helped residents rebuild trust in religious institutions while maintaining healthy skepticism of authority. Sister Mary Catherine's testimony led to the creation of a nationwide hotline for reporting suspicious activities in religious organizations. Her continued work with survivors helped many reconcile their faith with their experiences. The support group she founded for religious workers reporting abuse became a vital resource for whistleblowers. The Millbrook model, as it became known, demonstrated how communities could work together to protect their most vulnerable members. Regular conferences brought people from around the world to learn from their experience. The town's transformation from a place of hidden corruption to a center of healing and protection inspired similar changes in communities worldwide. The lasting impact extended to future generations as the children of Cedar Grove grew into advocates and protectors themselves. Their experiences shaped career choices in law enforcement, social work, and child advocacy. The strength they found through survival became a force for positive change, ensuring that Hannah's legacy of protection and healing continued. Thank you for watching this powerful story of courage, justice, and community resilience. What are your thoughts on Hannah's sacrifices and David's determination to uncover the truth? How would you have responded in Sarah's situation? Share your reflections in the comments below. If you found this story moving and important, please take a moment to support our team by subscribing to the channel. Every subscription helps us continue bringing you these meaningful narratives. Don't forget to like this video and share it with friends and family who might be touched by this message of hope and justice. Your engagement helps spread awareness about child protection and community vigilance. Together we can make a difference. Leave your thoughts below and join our community of viewers who believe in the power of storytelling to create positive change.